For the R12, we basically developed something which is new in a way that we are saying, okay, we have a much faster CPU. Let's see if we can actually get an optimal position solution, which we have now developed for the R12.
Trimble is designing and building its own boards to do all of the signal processing and all of the computations that go into producing an accurate GNSS solution.
This optimal solution is basically based on a large filter base where we are modeling all the error sources in a very proper way. The new CPU power and the possibility to process multiple carriers and multiple GNSS systems in one big filter has actually led to the positioning engine which we have today in the R12.
It's a complete new engine. It's redesigned in a way that it takes all of the current GNSS satellite signals available, selects the best signal or signal combinations available. It gives the engine flexibility to extract the most reliable position out of all constellations, out of all signals given.
Normally when I'm out doing a job, you're planning how you're going to get around and what you can and can't pick up with the GPS. So you think, right, I can get up to this far, but I'm going to have to set up the total station, shoot in that tree. But coming into this sort of environment, I wouldn't expect to be able to get a shot. And the quality of the precisions, horizontal and vertical, are what I'd usually be seeing with an R10 out in the open. It really does open up a whole different world of surveying with a GPS.
We have actually been able to prove that this positioning engine is better dealing with a variety of different situations where we are under trees, where we are obstructed in a different way. The R12 is now able to deal with the different signal tracking independently. So if you're thinking of jamming situations, right? Jamming is a thing which is becoming more and more important, and the R12 with the new positioning engine will actually continue to position even if the L1 is jammed. That has actually led to a performance increase of the R12 significantly.
Our customers, they expect to be able to push the limits in terms of where you want to be able to use GNSS. By allowing our customers to push those limits and to be confident in the result, they're going to be able to be more productive because they know that they can trust that position that they get the first time.
Andrew Salmon, who is the product manager for the R12. Andrew has also been a surveyor previously, and so I think he brings a great perspective to what he's going to share with you today. So we'll give you the full rundown of the new Trimble R12. If you do have questions, you're welcome to ask those in the questions box. Andrew's going to cover most of the questions I think we've already had so far since we've launched, especially things like comparing the R12 with the R10, and also comparing the R12 with other competitive systems on the market. If you do have any questions about pricing, that's best to contact your local Trimble distributor, and they can talk with you about that. But now we'll get into the presentation, and Andrew, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Michael. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody on the line. I see we've got folks from all around the world, so thank you very much for calling in today to learn some more about the Trimble R12. As Michael mentioned, my name is Andrew. I am the product manager for the R12, continuing from the R10 family. And today I'm going to take you through what is new and different with the Trimble R12 with the ProPoint GNSS technology. So we'll today be looking at a little bit of a history and leading up into today of Trimble's leadership in the GNSS field. We will introduce the Trimble R12 GNSS system to all of you. We're going to talk about some performance testing that we did internally to prove the capabilities of the new positioning engine, both against legacy Trimble systems as well as against some competitors. We're going to talk a little bit then about some best practices, some ways to best experience the capabilities of the R12. At the end, I'll go over a few of our frequently asked questions, and then for any questions that aren't answered, we'll have some Q&A time at the end. So again, get those questions just entered into the window there, and we'll try to address as many as we can toward the end of the presentation. So looking at Trimble's history of innovation in the GNSS space, so if we go back first to 1992, so this was when Trimble launched the 4000 SE, which was the first ever RTK GPS system. So prior to the advent of this product, any sort of kinematic positioning had to be done through a post-processing, whereas now for the first time ever with the 4000, we added the ability to have corrections in real time and to position with real-time estimates of your error and precision. Moving on, related to that, around the 94 year, we brought out the Trimble 4000 SSE, and so what that did was that it introduced on-the-fly initialization. So changing from having to initialize on a known point to then being able to initialize wherever the receiver happened to be. So that was another big step that we had, and this was all done within the context of Trimble's first RTK positioning engine. So if we move forward now to 1997, we released the Trimble 4800, the first all on the pole or integrated or smart GPS system. And with this was the debut of Trimble's second RTK positioning engine. It may not have been as well talked about at the time, but now that as we move forward, we're going to start to see we talk a lot more about differentiating our systems in terms of their positioning technology that goes into them. So moving forward now to 2005, here in the 21st century, we brought out the Trimble R8 GNSS. So changing now from GPS to GNSS. If you're a keen observer, you might note that we actually released the Trimble R8 GPS a couple of years prior to this. But when we brought out the R8 GNSS, where we introduced GLONASS for the first time, as well as our R-Track technology, so incorporating the new L2C and L5 GPS signals, this really represented the third major step in Trimble's RTK positioning technology. Coming now to 2012, when we brought out the Trimble R10. This was probably one of the first times we really started to talk about the positioning technology as a feature in and of itself. So here we introduced Trimble HD GNSS, and so for anyone who's familiar with the Trimble R10, they'll know that it was at this point that we moved away from the old paradigm of having a fixed solution and a float solution. We transcended that to where we had a solution which always provided a realistic estimate of the real-time error level, so allowing the user to make the decision if the error levels were acceptable for their application. So this brings us forward now to today, to 2019, where we are introducing the Trimble ProPoint GNSS technology with the Trimble R12. So this is Trimble's fifth generation of RTK GNSS technology. What we set out to do in developing this was to leverage the advances that we've made in the GNSS hardware, advances in general in mobile computing power, as well as in the GNSS constellations and the signals themselves. This is without a doubt Trimble's most advanced RTK positioning engine. You'll maybe have heard in the opening video there with Herbert Landau the fact that we have really updated the approach to signal management to take advantage of the advances in computing power. So we talk about now having this big filter approach versus what we used in the past, which was a different approach known as FAMCAR, for which we've referenced a paper there you can read if you're interested. But this was an approach which was used in the past to best leverage the limiting computing resources that were available to us. But now with this, the advances in the computing power, we've moved now to this optimal approach. So the result here with this positioning engine is that it is constellation and signal agnostic. It has some minimum requirements, but it otherwise will essentially position from whatever is available to it. A lot of advances have gone into the noise modeling with this new positioning engine, which allow us to achieve very precise results. And as well as we alluded to, this new engine with its modularity provides protection against potential sources of jamming. So now that we have talked a little bit about the history of Trimble's GNSS technology developments up to today, before I dive into talking about the R12 itself, I want to tease out a little bit of a customer experience. So I'm going to tee up a video here for you guys. This is just a short one, so take a look here at what some of our early users are saying, and then we're going to talk some more about the system itself.
We've been trialing the R12 in various locations around the country where we know there's heavy tree canopy in rural areas, and also we've used it in a heavy built environment in around the city centre. We find a significant improvement in using the R12 as opposed to using the existing R8s and R10s within our fleet. The feedback's been very good from the field surveyors. They find that there is a significant increase in efficiency on site, as the initialization process is a lot quicker, so it is. And also we're not losing satellite coverage as we were with older equipment.
So thank you very much, by the way, to our distributor in the UK, Corec, for putting that video together with Murphy Surveys over in Ireland. Really appreciated getting some of that early feedback from those guys. As you heard, they were quite impressed with the performance. So we're going to talk now about the R12 and its capabilities. We're going to get into some content about the different testing, as I mentioned before, and then we will we'll head back to another video. But moving forward now, so with the Trimble R12 GNSS system, so you'll probably recognize the form factor. This is obviously a direct descendant of the Trimble R10 family. But what is really key here, what is different, is the ProPoint GNSS technology. So what we have here really is an all new real-time GNSS positioning engine using any and all available GNSS constellations and signals. So what does that mean for the system in practice? Well, when we have more signals, what we end up with is more satellites in our solution. When we have more satellites in our solution, we have a better opportunity to get a good positioning geometry in order to derive a precise position for the receiver. This system is so flexible it will even use single frequency inputs if those happen to be available, or if other frequencies are missing. It's going to take in everything that's available to it. And as part of that flexibility there, we have the ability even to form stochastically independent solutions from a single correction source by positioning with different combinations of GNSS constellations. So for example, GPS and Galileo, as well as Beidou and GLONASS. We could form solutions separately with those different constellations and have independent solutions. But what it all boils down to, the main benefit that our customers are going to see in the field is is the ability to measure in challenging GNSS environments. So, areas where GNSS rovers traditionally struggle. So in treed areas or in built environments, the ability to measure in those areas with increased accuracy, reliability, and productivity. And we're going to talk about what each of those mean here in just a moment. So the message that we are putting out with this product here, the main tagline is to push the boundaries of GNSS performance. And that ties into our marketing campaign theme here, which is go further. So what we want to impart to users who have, who are familiar with using GNSS positioning systems, that what they're going to be able to do with this is to start to push into areas where they've traditionally struggled. So what we want is for our users to be able to measure reliably where other systems cannot, key on reliability there, and to allow the user really just to get the shot faster and to keep working with their rover as their primary positioning tools, reducing the reliance on less efficient methods like a total station, which obviously still has a place and is critical to work that surveyors do. But for a lot of applications, if we can get that measurement with the rover, and that's going to be good enough, then that's going to save us a lot of time in the field. So as we're going to show here in our testing results, we've demonstrated typical accuracy and productivity improvements in excess of 30% in these challenging GNSS environments with this system. In addition to the new ProPoint GNSS technology, we have all of the technology and capabilities that we've inherited through the R10 legacy. So with the R10 Model 2, we introduced the latest Trimble custom ASIC with 602 GNSS channels. So this was really designed and built into this platform with an eye toward ProPoint GNSS. And as an added bonus with our new RF ASIC, we did actually manage to get a 30% longer battery life from the existing R10 battery. In addition to this, we have all of the different productivity beyond GNSS features that we've carried through this R10 product family. So Trimble Xfill and Centerpoint RTX, which both rely on that RTX technology, which is now able to deliver 2 centimeter horizontal position quality worldwide without any need for a base station or a BRS network. Trimble SurePoint for tilt compensation and for the e-bubble and QA information. Our much emulated ergonomic design, which I'll mention here, mil-spec rugged. There have been R10 units, out in mine sites in Western Australia since 2012 that are still out there running, and we can hardly believe it at sometimes. Beyond that, all of the normal communications devices that we'd expect in there, UHF, cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. And lastly here, with the R10 Model 2, we introduced, in addition to compatibility with Android devices, also iOS, so Apple devices, for those bring your own device types of workflows, whether it's a GIS type of thing or whatever the case may be. And next I'm going to get into some of these testing results I've been alluding to, but here I just wanted to show you a couple of testimonials that we've gotten from some other early users here. So we've seen in general that folks are talking about the improved precision and reliability and accuracy relative to the R10. And the fact that this is going to allow them to significantly expand their use of GNSS in challenging locations. So thanks there to folks at Altera Deutschland and Adam Long with Sam in the US for providing those testimonials based on their experiences. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how much we've improved the performance with the R12 and with ProPoint technology. So what we want to do here is present some results that are derived from the testing that our teams did internally in order for us to be satisfied that this was ready for prime time to go out to our users. So I'm going to show you first some comparisons of the performance of the R12 versus the R10 Model 2. And then once I've gone through those, we'll look at the performance of the R12 relative to a couple of its competitors. Just an overview of the performance testing. So, we wanted to get a worldwide scope here. So we had test sites in the US and New Zealand and in Germany. Each of these test sites consisted of multiple obstructed points. These points were surveyed with total stations so that we would have very accurate truth reference. And these were all in either tree or urban or mixed environments with buildings and trees. And how we evaluated the performance in these tests was to look at three things. And these are three things that we focused on because these are really key to our customers and how they use this tool and how it benefits them. So the measures that we used were one, accuracy. So we want to look at the how do we compare to that optical truth that we're able to go in and determine very precisely. The reliability. So it says here the percentage of errors falling within real-time estimates. Now what that means is do the actual errors relative to your mean position fall within the real-time error estimates that you get in the field? So Trimble Access displays those at a 1 sigma level, and we'll look at how well we conform to that. And then thirdly, the productivity. So when we're measuring in a difficult environment, we want to look at the time that it takes to converge and store a point. And if we're comparing systems, then we want to look at how many points was each system able to store, because we can infer from that if a system was unable to store a point, that would be a location where we would have to fall back to our total station or another tool. Okay, so I'll go through the sites quickly just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Because we know that every scenario is different, no two locations are the same, no 2 days are the same. So obviously results will vary, but we want to show you what we were doing and where we were operating to get the results that we're going to present. So first, what I have here is what we call our medium canopy test site. So you can see the overhead view there with the points denoted, as well as on the right, what you're seeing is an upward looking view with a few GNSS rovers looking up toward the tree cover. So, we're not talking about like dense jungle, nor are we talking about, massive redwood forest, but, this is still a decently challenging environment of deciduous trees here, probably up to 10 meters tall. Moving forward now, we have what we call our partial urban test site. So this is just in front of our office in Colorado. With some points located just to the north of what is here. You can see a 4-story glass and steel type of building. So obstructing signals from satellites to the south, as well as producing multipath in that environment. But otherwise here, as you can maybe tell from the satellite photo, mostly open to the northeast and west. We had a mixed environment. This is in Germany, and this included, buildings and trees. So you can see on the left the type of buildings we're talking about here. Again, this is, kind of in the 4 or 5 story range, but a decently dense environment as far as urban built environment goes. So certainly going to be having a lot of signal obstruction as well as multipath in this environment. And then finally, the last site that we'll look at is our difficult, what we call our difficult urban test environment. So here we really were in sort of a 360 built environment, so a lot of obstruction, modern buildings, a lot of smooth surfaces, so high multipath. And in addition, there were some points there, as you can maybe tell in the satellite photo up toward the north end of the test course, where we're positioning in some tight alleys, so we're going to have very narrow sky view. So I'll move into the results here, and maybe just to break it down quickly, what you're seeing along the bottom, you have the 4 different test sites denoted. So The blue represents the results that we got with the R12. The yellow represents the results that we got with the R10 Model 2. So here in this first plot, we are looking at what was the average horizontal error. I'm just going to focus on horizontal. The vertical looks very much the same, but here we wanted to focus on the 2D positioning. So as we go through the results here, first looking at the canopy test site, what we see is that the R12 here was able to achieve an average error on the order of 17 millimeters versus the R10 Model 2, which was up around 9 centimeters. You could say 3/10 if you're talking in survey feet. Apologize, this will mostly be in metric. But really what we have here is what I would call the difference between being able to work at survey precisions and not. So while the R10 Model 2 and the R10 in general was always a strong performer in these types of difficult environments, what we're illustrating here is just how much this has improved with the R12 to where it can make the difference from being able to use this the R12 to use RTK as your primary tool or not. In the partial urban environment next to our office here, we had another great result with the R12, an average error down around 1 centimeter versus actually something closer to 1 meter with the R10 Model 2. What you're not seeing in the averages here is that the R10 Model 2, did get some good observations in this area, but what it suffered from was having some outliers or some blunders that were not detected in the data. So what you're seeing as an average, if we were able to remove those, we would see a much better result. But we want to show you guys the actual honest results that we got here. So what you see is that the R10 Model 2 suffered here because of those undetected outliers. The difficult urban canyon environment that I mentioned. So here we see that the R10 Model 2 was up over 2.5 meters, so really unusable for most applications, except for maybe some really loose GIS work. And then the R12 down under around 0.5 meter. So here again, the data does incorporate some outliers, which make those average errors look a little bit larger. But what we're really trying to illustrate here by showing you this result is that the R12, while it is a significant improvement with the ProPoint GNSS technology, RTK is still never going to be the tool for every single application. If we're operating, in a dense urban environment where we're dealing with very strict boundaries or very precise work in terms of hardscapes and grades and these kinds of things, it's just to illustrate that RTK probably is not the tool for this application, and that our total station still very much is an important part of the surveyor's toolkit. Finally, on the mixed urban treat environment, here we see with the R10 Model 2 a very good result considering, especially how difficult that environment was. We had an average error of around 35 millimeters, or about 1/10 of a survey foot, versus around 14 centimeters with the R10 Model 2. So again, in a lot of cases, going to be making the difference between RTK being able to accomplish the task or not. Moving on here, we're going to look at the reliability. So here we actually want to see larger bars. So larger bars would be better in this case because we want to see a higher percentage of the points falling within that 1 sigma estimate that we get. So for a 2D RMS, our target is 65%. And what we see virtually across the board, with the exception of that difficult urban environment, that with the ProPoint GNSS positioning engine, we are getting reliabilities that are north of 60 or 70%. So what that translates to for the user is them really being able to trust the numbers that they're seeing in the field, those real-time error estimates, so that they're able to be confident of using RTK for their particular application. We see with the R10 Model 2, with the HD GNSS technology, that those numbers become less reliable, particularly in these tough environments. And again, in the difficult urban environment, we see how even with the improved performance of ProPoint GNSS technology, as we start to approach the limit of the capabilities of RTK, those error estimates do start to become less reliable, and we get a lower number there. Finally, here we will look at the average time on point as a measure of productivity. So generally, when our testers are measuring in these types of difficult environments, what they're doing is they are initiating a measurement to put the RTK positioning engine into a static mode to allow the position solution to converge, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what we're showing here is the time on average that it takes for the solution to converge down to to within the survey thresholds and to store a point. So with the canopy site, we see first that the R12 on average was around 30 seconds to store a point versus the R10 Model 2, which was up around 140 seconds. So you can imagine, if you've got a number of points to measure in a difficult type of environment, then you're going to save a lot of time with the R12 versus the R10 Model 2. The partial urban canyon environment, there's a bit of a weird anomaly in the data. We see a flip. So we actually see that the R12 took a little bit longer, 9 seconds on average versus 2 seconds with our R10 Model 2. But if you think back to the results, obviously, we had some poor outcomes there with the R10 Model 2 just due to some undetected blunders. So while we took a little bit longer, in this case with the R12, what we see is that those results were still much more reliable. So we would consider that to be, an acceptable trade-off. In the difficult environment, the times they go up there as well, and we know that those results can be more fraught with error. Finally, the mixed urban and tree environment. We had an average observation time of 5 seconds with the with the R12 versus over 30 with the R10 Model 2. If you remember that overhead view of that test site, there were a lot of points there. So you can imagine if you're measuring that many points, that time savings really starts to add up in the field. Okay, so now that we've looked at the R12 in comparison to the R10 Model 2, its predecessor, now we're going to talk about how the R12 compared to its competition. So for the purposes of this section, we're just going to look at the canopy test site. So what you're seeing here, the two different data sets, these represent a single baseline over 5 kilometers and a VRS solution over 15 kilometers. So you're just seeing a couple of different solution types. But otherwise, it's the same test course. And here on the plot, we have in the dark blue, the R12. In the light blue, we'll call competitor A. And then in gray, we have competitor B. So looking at these results, single baseline and VRS, we see that the R12 on average, was giving us great survey precisions below 2 centimeters here for the average over the entire course versus our competitors, which were in the range of decimeters. So, 15, 20 centimeters, 35 centimeters, really not usable for survey applications in general, maybe for some GIS type work, but certainly not good enough for survey. And so here we see that the R12 is making the difference between that user being able to stick to their RTK rover versus having to break out a total station and take that extra time to get those results. Again, the reliability where we want to see a higher number, here we see the R12, north of 70%, north of, even 80%, really great reliability that we get from the real-time estimates in the field versus the competitors being, 20% or below, even as low as 0%. So where you had none of the results actually, falling within the error estimates that were provided to the user in real time. So, you can imagine how this might make a big difference if you're in the field and you're seeing that a competitor system is able to go in and store a point in the same location as the R12. Well, then what I would think next is, well, how repeatable is that? How accurate is that? How much can I rely on those error estimates that I got? And as we see here, the R12 is really head and shoulders above its competition in these regards. Finally, the productivity, again, we see the R12 and the single baseline case in particular really outperforming its competitors. So it was able to store all 32 points in this case with an average time of 17 seconds in the single baseline test. Its competitors, by comparison, took much longer on average, 80 seconds up to 170 seconds. Not only that, but in parentheses there on the tops of the bars, you see the number of points that each system was able to store. So I mentioned that earlier, but here we see that the competitors were able to store 25% fewer points, in addition to having those poorer results in terms of accuracy and reliability that we showed. In the VRS case, where we're on a much longer baseline, the time difference was a little bit less pronounced in versus one of the competitors, certainly more pronounced versus another. But again, we saw that the results with the R12 were really just much better in terms of its accuracy and reliability. In fact, here with competitor B in gray, we see that it was able to store more points. But what we know is that those results were not very good there. Okay, I'm going to get into next some best practices and things, just to talk about how you would go about seeing the types of performance improvements that we're talking about here. But maybe first, just to break it up, I'm going to throw in another video. This comes from one of our users, Lee Landman, who's in South Africa. And here he's going to compare the R10 to the R12 in the field. So take a look.
Trees. It's fireman fern fishing. This is a big old oak tree.
Big. By the more foliage. Ah, got it.
Easy, man. Let's try a harder one. Also,
Quite a hard one.
Yeah, it's really quite a hard one. How long has it been going? Oh,
there we go. Got it.
Wild African fig tree. That's not going to happen. All right, go with the curve shot first.
Yeah, fix it.
Easy test put shot.
Let's see you get the other side of the road. Waiting here for a while.
This is a big ash tree. Yeah, 3 minutes. Let's abort it. Also a tough shot.
One. Boom.
Yeah, that's pretty good, eh?
With the normal R10. Oh, you got a fish. Wait.
But hang on.
Shit.
Shit.
Mine was way bigger.
You're right. You able to
Hold
catch
them in the
one
mouth like that.
Oh,
there,
shit.
and then you can't take a photo of you. There's only one person who hasn't caught a fish.
R10, 300-year-old oak.
R10's battling on here.
Yeah, it's got 6 satellites, that's why.
Oh.
And then you try what you did one over here.
There's 13 satellites.
Yeah. Call it a day, R10. Didn't make it.
Okay, Okay, so maybe just to provide a quick recap of what happened in that video in case it wasn't totally clear. So the guys there in the video, they had an R12 as well as an R10, I believe it was a Model 2. And what they tried to do was tried to get, there were 3 different, really challenging points that they wanted to go test out the performance of the R12 with. So in their tests, in those, what were some pretty tough environments, they were unable to store points with the R10 on any of the 3. With the R12, they were able to get 2 of the 3. So again, illustrating that while this isn't going to get every single observation in the most difficult environments, it's really going to expand your capabilities there in these challenging situations that surveyors encounter in their jobs. So that's another great bit of user experience that we've seen early on here. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Lee and learn more about his experience, he's on Instagram, Slugsy100. He's got a great account, so check it out if you're on there, and hit him up, and maybe he'll give you some of his insights as well. Okay, so last bit here that we're going to go through, I'm going to talk about the best practices, and then we'll go over some of our FAQ and get into Q&A. So we got about 20 minutes left here, so I'll move through this quickly as I can to try and leave some time left over for questions. So in order to best experience the capabilities and the performance of the R12, we wanted to give you guys some general guidelines, just because we found with some of our early users that some of the habits are maybe a little bit different than they have been in the past. So what we want to look at first is that we've got an area with GNSS obstructions, so things like trees and buildings. We've been talking a lot about how this gives us improved performance in challenging environments. What we're not expecting to see really is improved in performance in open environments. So, RTK performance very much is the same across whatever manufacturer. If you're, out in an open sky benign environment, you're going to get a great position. That's not a problem. So we want to focus on getting into these tougher environments. For the ProPoint GNSS engine to be able to deliver the best result, we want to enable all of our supported and visible constellations plus L5 or triple frequency tracking. So when I say all supported constellations and frequencies, in order for a signal to end up in your solution or a satellite, that has to be tracked by both the base and the rover. So that's the limitation here. If your base station or your VRS network isn't giving you all of the constellations and triple frequency, then you're going to be a little bit limited in that regard. So if you're using your own base where you can enable all of the different constellations and frequencies, then that's going to deliver the best result. When you are looking at the performance in the field, you're going to want to identify locations where the RTK solution becomes degraded. So, a lot of times people who get this product at first, they expect that they're going to, walk into a difficult environment and that they're just going to see on the screen that they've got a great survey, great solution, and they're able to start measuring points. As I alluded to earlier, the way in which the RTK engine achieves a very good precise result here is by actually having the user initiate a measurement while static on a point. What that does is that kind of changes the positioning mode of the engine from roving to static. And what that's going to do is it is going to basically force the positioning engine for that solution to converge down to a precise result. So we always want you to be using either topo points or the observe control point method. We just recommend using the automatic tolerances. The problem with a rapid point is that this does not force the positioning engine to go into this static mode, so you wouldn't be getting the best capabilities out of it. So all this to say that when you get into an environment where you want to measure a point, if at first before you initiate a measurement the precisions are inflated, that's okay. You can initiate a point and you'll expect to see those converge. So the other thing that you want to be doing here is to take repeated measurements and to compare the results, including reinitializing between observations. So as I mentioned before in the slides where we're talking about testing, another system may give you a result in a particular difficult environment, but what is really important here is the repeatability. So taking repeated measurements, resetting that initialization, and seeing how those results compare, that's going to give you a good sense of how the R12 is outperforming its competitors or Trimble legacy systems. So talking about competition, if we're comparing the R12 to a competitor system, the things that we focus on or that we want to look at in the field, its ability to converge and to measure more quickly. We saw that in our test results, that it's going to converge and give you that result much faster. Another simple thing to look at is the number of satellites in the solution. So with the ProPoint positioning engine, as we've mentioned, it's going to use everything that's available to it. And what you typically end up with as a result is a higher number of satellites in the solution. So that's one easy thing to look at and compare. And then as I mentioned on the previous slide, the repeatability and the reliability. So, measuring multiple points and seeing how those results look when we start to get a bit of a spread. Now, if we're talking about a competitor system with IMU-based tilt compensation, so the thing to understand about these systems, and maybe you've been given demos of these products or you've been interested in them in the past, the thing to know about these is that these systems really rely on having a very good RTK solution. And in fact, what we see is that these products tend to struggle in challenging GNSS environments. They're not able to resolve the heading because their RTK solution is simply too poor. So in our tests against one of our competitors who provides this type of a IMU-based tilt compensation, what we found was that we were unable to operate in these types of environments with that product. With that feature enabled, and what we had to do was disable that tilt compensation in order to just be able to use GNSS only with the results that you saw previously. So, compare the GNSS only performance of the R12 against these types of systems, and we're sure you'll be convinced that the R12 is the superior performer, but also, understand that about this type of solution is that in difficult environments, it can really become a struggle for those products. Okay, so I'm just going to go through here some frequently asked questions quickly, and then we'll have looks like about 10 minutes for Q&A. So first and foremost, some things that come up: which versions of Trimble Access support the Trimble R12? So the versions that you're going to want to be using, if you're on one of the new Windows 10 based controllers, so TSC7, T10, or the T7, the latest version is 2019.10 of Trimble Access. If you are on one of the legacy controllers, so like the TSC3 or the UMA 2 tablet, one of those, the version that you're going to want to be using is 2017.24, and that will have support for the R12. Next, what is the difference between the Trimble R12 and the Trimble R10 Model 2? So if you look at the data sheet, you might notice that a lot of the specs are exactly the same. In fact, here the hardware really is very much the same internally. So we went to the R12 name really to to emphasize and to convey this improvement in the technology, because we have something really fundamentally new here with the ProPoint positioning engine. So that makes it really quite different to its predecessor that people are familiar with. That said, the R10 Model 2 does have the GNSS and the computing power to run the new ProPoint positioning engine, and so we are making available an upgrade which will allow the R10 Model 2 user to install a firmware with the new ProPoint positioning engine. So you can talk to your distributor about that. What tilt compensation technology does the R12 use? So you may have figured out from our discussion we just had there, but the R12 is using the same tilt compensation technology that we've been using all throughout the life of the R10. So, this uses accelerometers and a magnetometer in order to perform tilt compensation. Just know that technology is unchanged in the Trimble R12. Some folks have brought up this question, and I alluded to it earlier, but what if my corrections don't include all GNSS constellations and L5? So as we say, the best result that we're going to get from ProPoint is going to come from having all of the different constellations and signals enabled, just so that we can, have a higher probability of getting a good satellite geometry and having good signals in our solution. That said, if you do not have all of the different visible constellations or the third frequency, that's not to say that you're not going to see an improvement in performance versus a Trimble legacy system or a competitor system. So we would expect still improved performance there, although it might not achieve quite the same level as we would get with all of our constellations and signals, but it still very much will be improved. Finally, how can I learn more about Trimble ProPoint? We've talked about it a lot in this presentation. Some of the videos talk about it a little bit, but if folks are looking to dig in and get some more of the details on the technical side, we are working on publishing a white paper, which will discuss all of these different things. So, how it's different from its predecessors. And then we're also going to talk about those test results that I showed you here, and how those were all derived. So with that said, we can go now to some of the questions that you guys have brought up during the presentation here.
So Andrew, there was a question coming in. I know you covered the constellations, but does the R12 support all of the available constellations?
Yes, it does. So, everything GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, Beidou, regional systems like QZSS, IRNSS, we support, or NAVIC as it's also known, we support the L5 signal, don't support the band signal, but that's just a physical limitation. But otherwise, yes, every single constellation, as well as some of the newer signals that are coming along, so things like Beidou 3 or GPS L1C, although they're a little bit limited now at this point, just because those are still developing, we do support those as well. So in the future, you'll have support for all of the different constellations and signals.
And kind of as you mentioned in the best practices, I think, a lot of surveyors right now might be just running off GPS and GLONASS, but you'd recommend tracking all available constellations?
Yeah, all of the visible constellations. So if I'm in North America and I turn on QZSS, which is primarily over Japan and that area of Asia, that's not going to do anything for me. It's just going to, in fact, just be a burden on my battery life. So you don't want to be tracking anything that isn't visible to you. But apart from that, yeah, you really want to give it all of the available information. So all of the constellations with triple frequency tracking, I would recommend.
And you may have covered this earlier, but if someone has a new R12, they're trying to get the most performance out of it, do they need to have an R12 at the base, as a base station as well, or not?
No. So as I mentioned before, the critical aspect here is having the base and the rover tracking the same signals and constellations. That's required for any satellite or signal to end up in your solution. It has to be tracked at both the base and rover. So for example, if somebody had an R10 Model 2 as their base station, or they had something like a Trimble Alloy receiver where they're getting all of the same constellations and signals, that's fine. Then you'll get everything in your solution with your rover. If you have a receiver at your base which doesn't deliver all of the constellations, that would be maybe one limitation there. But the ProPoint positioning engine, that's your real-time kinematic positioning engine. So that's not important for your base station.
There's a question that came in about the constellation agnostic ability. Is that supported on both? If you're using like a TSC3 with the older version of Trimble Access and the new version on like a TSC7?
That's a good question. So that is one limitation with the legacy access version, I would call it. So 2017.24 running on the TSC3 and other controllers like that. That one will not support the some of the constellation agnostic capabilities. So what you'll see there is that all of the same hard requirements are in the field software with the legacy version, whereas with the current version 2019.10, you really have the ability to enable or disable whatever constellation you choose.
And there's a question specifically about the vertical accuracy between the R12 or CR10, and I think the question is probably, you covered a lot of testing results in challenging environments. Are you able to speak to specifically the vertical accuracy difference in the R12 and R10 in those challenging environments?
Yeah, so and the reason that we have a plot that shows the exact same thing as those horizontal average errors. We just pulled it out just to save time, but the results that we got there in terms of the vertical, they very much matched the horizontal. So both in terms of the accuracy as well as that reliability. So the reliability of the error estimates. We saw very similar results, and as I mentioned, those will be published in our ProPoint white paper when we get that out.
And there were a few questions, just coming in on talking about precision and also talking about accuracy. I know you kind of spoke a lot in the best practices about how to approach that, but with the precision shown in Trimble Access being a truer estimate of that, do you also recommend making sure that a surveyor, when they get an R12 and they're testing it out, to check into known control points and make sure they're testing precision and accuracy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, nothing is ever a replacement for good survey practice. So certainly, typical error checks would always apply at the beginning of the day. You want to be checking into known control, make sure that you've got a good base position and everything looks correct. Where we get into talking about accuracies, particularly when we're measuring points in challenging environments, more often than not, we don't have a known point in those areas for us to check into as a kind of a control or a truth reference. While of course we want to be just doing our normal survey checks that we do throughout the course of the day, when we're in these types of harsh environments, if we want to see just how good of a solution we're getting, I would just again emphasize resetting your initialization and remeasuring points just to look at what the repeatability of those results is, because as we saw in the data, it is still possible, although it's much less likely that you could end up with an outlier in your results. It's still possible, so we want to be doing those types of checks where we're reinitializing and remeasuring.
And there's a question on if this presentation will be available. We're not making this presentation publicly available, but our Trimble distributors have this information. And also the R12 is shipping now, and so the distributors have this. So our recommendation there is to reach out to your local Trimble distributor, take an R12 out, test it, and kind of see how you get a feel for it. That's the best way to get a little bit more familiar with how it might perform in your part of the world. Looks like that's all the main questions that came in. Andrew, anything else you wanted to share?
No, I would just emphasize, as Michael said, as soon as you can, if you get an opportunity to get out and demo the R12 with the ProPoint GNSS technology, encourage you to do so. Try to push the limits. Try to find out where those limits are. Do some tests for yourself. Prove it to yourself. None of us likes a black box. We want to get a feel for how this performs so that we can be effective with it as a tool. We've shown a lot of results here that we think very well demonstrate that we've come to a great result here with the new ProPoint positioning engine. And so we want you guys to get out and experience that, and it's just a matter of getting a feel for it. So really hope you all get to try it out soon, and let us know how that goes by all means. But apart from that, again, just want to thank everybody for calling in today, for your questions. Thanks again to all of the different partners who have provided some of this early testimonial and the videos. Those, I think, help get the message across better than we could ever do just by talking to you about it. So check out more of that type of material on YouTube and LinkedIn, Instagram, those things, and get out and experience it for yourself. So again, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew. And I just dropped a link to the R12 website. It's r12.trimble.com. And if you did want to have a distributor contact you, you can fill out a form there. That's a great way. If you're not sure who to reach out to or who your local distributor is, you can just fill out that form and someone will get in contact with you soon. So yeah, thanks again for joining, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.